Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. All right. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm good. How are you?
I am all right. Have you done any gaming? We spoke last week, and now this is a new week. So maybe you were supposed to on Friday night. Did it work
Yeah,
out?
we finished the third chapter of the Age of Sigmar Soulbound role-playing game
Cool.
book that we're going through. So we're halfway through that now. I'm hoping I can finish it in another 3 sessions, which would put us at 7 sessions. I saw someone online said it took them 25 sessions.
Oh.
So I'm like, wow, I really I don't let my players go off topic and we just get on with it. Also, I've only got 2 players, so but anyway,
that helps.
How about you?
We played Kingmaker again. We were down 2 players, so we had 3 out of 5, which I made some adjustments to make it work and ended on a cliffhanger. And so we'll ended on a violent cliffhanger. So we'll see how that works out this coming session. So today, as evidenced by Chris's background, we're going to talk about Modiphius's 2D20 Fallout role-playing game. You're holding up the book right there, which is actually showing. That's nice.
Yeah.
Because all things Fallout are very exciting to people right now. It seems lots of people I see online, lots of pictures of Vault this and Vault that, and that blue and yellow color scheme, and talking about wanting to play Fallout. And smart, very intelligent. I mean, on behalf of Modiphius, I've seen lots of stuff from them on their Discord and emails and things like that, leveraging the spotlight that the property has on it through the Amazon show, which I've not watched.
I mean, they were meant to be doing even better because they're launching a new sort of miniatures game called Fallout Factions, which is, as it turns out, I know one of the developers, but I didn't know that.
Oh,
but
that's
I do
cool.
And that was meant to be out by now, and it's been delayed to sort of July, by which point Fallout will not be the big thing. So
Fallout will have fallen out by that point, and we'll have moved on to something else. You have a physical copy of the rulebook. I have a PDF copy of the rulebook. I also have a physical copy of the starter box. So I have read through the rulebook. I've read through and looked through the starter box, and you also have the Game Master's kit thing.
Toolkit, which I thought also came with the GM screen, and it turns out that the Games Master's toolkit is separate from the GM screen.
Okay,
so this came with a booklet and some counters and some pads, but not the screen. So that's a new one on me.
So let's do this. Let us talk about the game. Now, what's interesting is that, by the way, you're supposed to like, you're supposed to subscribe, you're supposed to get involved in the conversation. We'll remind you at the end. But what's interesting about Fallout as a property and as a game, as a role-playing game for Modiphius, is you and I have talked about doing something about Fallout, a game spotlight or a subsystem spotlight, the scavenging system. We've talked about that on and off for ages, and it just keeps slipping off the table. So we're finally getting to it. So
thank you, Amazon, for creating a TV program which brought Fallout back into the limelight and made us go.
That's right.
Did we ever actually do that spotlight? And you were like, I don't think we did. And I was like, I don't know. No, so we're doing it. We're doing it now. This is it.
We're doing it now. So let's go ahead and start with the basics. It's a 2D20 based role-playing game. Duh.
Yes.
It has challenge dice, which I think is worth mentioning now because Star Trek Adventure 2nd Edition doesn't have challenge dice. Dune doesn't have some others don't. It does. And yet there are also, at least from my view, there are some system differences that make it completely unique in the constellation of 2D20 games. What else do we need to establish, though, before we go into some of those? What makes it what it is in the 2D20 verse, if you want to call it that, and how do they try to meet the needs of Fallout as a property?
I think that's the thing. That the reason why it plays, where there are differences, it's naming. It plays the same as things. You still roll between 2 and 5 D20s. Yep. You still go against the target number, which is stat and skill. You still can get a bonus from rolling under a particular thing, which gives you critical successes. You still generate a meta currency from getting more successes. You can still spend that meta currency for getting more dice. You can also spend the meta currency for more damage. You still roll combat dice. There are still effects on the combat dice. There are still, things
There
on
are
the
weapon
weapons.
qualities and item qualities. Yeah.
So a lot of people have issue. I mean, you will probably get to it. I played this, and because I had played, Conan and Infinity and Star Trek, when I got this book, I was like, I didn't even get the book actually, because I played this during COVID, so I played this online. But I played it with the PDFs, and I had no problems. I could work. I had one problem I had, which I completely solved, no problems. I played this because I knew what I was doing to 220. So I have seen people in the past say, "Oh, there are issues with it." I think it's one of those things we've mentioned this a few times now. Because we jump from 2D20 book to 2D20 book, we sometimes will pick up a new 2D20 book and be like, "Oh, I know everything in here." And so there might be things we actually get wrong because we just gloss over them, or we know how to deal with it. That other people might get this and go, "Ugh." One of the things I think is very different from how they set it is the layout. Almost always the books start with background, then have character creation, all the character creation with skills and talents and all that stuff. And then they usually go into the rules and the combat rules then. This book, and I was surprised again looking through it this morning, this book does not do that. It starts off with the core rules, and it does a pretty quick version of the core rules. I've definitely seen them explain the core rules in more detail in other places. And then it goes into combat, which is quite a short section, and then it goes into character creation, which I prefer this. I'd rather have, I don't know. I guess there's arguments both ways. But anyway, so it's different.
I did not do this intentionally, but that's how Eris is sequenced. I give a brief introduction to the setting. I spend a chapter on the core rules. I spend a chapter on action and conflict, and then go to character creation, because there are certain things, and I can see this in pretty much any game, but I can definitely see it in Fallout as well. There are certain things you would want to understand about how the game functions before you make a character. Otherwise, you make your character, and then you go and you read this stuff, and then you go play it, and you're like, my character doesn't really do what I want it to do. So I can understand the sequencing. What about the talking about character creation, or we want to talk about character creation?
No, I don't need to do rules because let's do it in the rule to the book. There are two main rules differences. Now, this is not a simple case of saying that it's just a renaming thing.
Right.
It's more than that. Number one is momentum does not exist. Now, we could just say, some people go, "Oh, well, it's still momentum. He's just changed the name." No, because it works different. It kind of works different.
There are some differences. It's not just the name.
They are called action points. Now, the reason they are called action points is in the Fallout 3 and 4 computer games, when you get into combat, it's not, there is a mode you can go into where instead of it being fully real time, you kind of don't quite real time. It's a bit weird. It's very hard to explain, but essentially you kind of have an action point to come in. And that's where they've got that from. So action points are kind of like momentum. You earn them the same way. If you get extra successes, you earn action points you can spend straight away. And if you don't spend them, they go into a group pull, same as momentum. You can spend them for extra damage, same as momentum. You can spend them for obtaining information, same as momentum. You can buy extra D20s, and the same as in the modern version where it's 1 for 1, 2 for the second dice, and 3 for the third dice. So the full 6 that someone else has banked, you could spend on getting 3 extra dice. And you can give them to your GM. You can buy them off your GM, or give them to your GM, however you want to think about it. So there is no fancy doom or threat or heat or anything. You have action points, and the GM has action points. So that's the first thing. But they can do 2 extra things because they are called action points. You can spend them for extra actions, which is bonkers. Because normally that's in the realm of like the second meta currency, like fortune.
Although actually in a number of the games you can spend momentum, but then you take an extra action and you take it at a higher difficulty.
Yes.
Whereas spending fortune or determination enables you to take another action without an increase in difficulty. So this is different
I think the difference is that those are it's a combat momentum spend where if you generate momentum, you can spend momentum on having a second attack. Whereas this is kind of like a stand. I mean, I guess it's still part of combat, but it's basically if there is action points floating around, you can just take a second action. It doesn't have to be I've just done an attack as I do this. So if you've got a non-combat, if you don't want to, because there are quite a few non-combat actions, you could do 2 essentially non-combat actions. I don't think you can really do that in other versions of 2D20 because you haven't attacked.
I think that the difference is, I mean, obviously the name difference is it's something to pay attention to. The fact that there isn't a different name for the GM's pool, and there are some different spend opportunities. I don't think fundamentally the meta currency is different, like at its foundation, but there are differences. You can't just assume, like, I remember when I played, it was either Star Trek Adventures or Octoon Cthulhu after having played some Conan, and you have to remind yourself that, the additional D20s is the modern, the stat, it's not 1 per, and you go, oh yeah, wait a minute, the spends are different. And so that
I didn't know that until you told me.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I've played another 2D20 game, I'm going to check out Fallout because I like the show. Recognize that the action point meta currency is worth paying attention to because there are some differences.
Yeah.
Not just the name.
And then the second thing is that the second meta currency just works differently. You haven't got some kind of determination or fortune thing where you get 1 or 2 points and it's your Uber thing, where usually the thing is you spend the point and you get an extra dice and it's already on a 1, so you get a critical. That's what every version of 2D20 I can think of has that. This does not. This has luck. Now the reason it has luck is, again, it comes from the game. There is a luck stat in the game, which we will get to, and your luck stat in this gives you luck points, which you can spend to add details, so kind of link into traits, which I don't think I've seen anything about traits or truths in here. Is that my imagination, or are they not in here?
In most 2D20 games, it is an underexplained, underemphasized piece of the game.
I don't think
you have this stat called luck, which then you spend or can spend during a session to impact things. So that, and we've seen other games like that in the past. Cyberpunk 2020 had a luck stat that you would spend, and you could spend to increase die rolls and things like that. So you have a similarity there, and then actually that's what adds. Although I don't want to get to character creation yet because we're not past action.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely it's not as powerful as in other ones. I mean, the 2 main things you're going to use it for is if you don't have a skill and an ability. It says you can use your luck attribute for a skill test, which seems weird. I can't work if that's incredibly powerful. It says use your luck instead of the default attribute used for that test. I feel like that would always be, maybe on the off chance it might be. If you've got a really high luck attribute, that probably will be better than your skill.
Although how often can you do that?
Yeah, well, you have to spend a luck point to it, so that seems a bit odd. And then you can spend it to re-roll, so not buy extra dice. It's only re-roll dice.
Okay. Which is tempting fate, depending.
But yes, you haven't got any of the kind of the almost auto success thing that we used to have with determination and fortune.
One thing mechanically, though, on the action point side is that the default for the GM, normally in every other game, the default for threat is 2 per player at the table. This is 1 per player at the table. Which, obviously puts the GM in a position where the GM doesn't have as much currency starting a session to do this, that, or whatever on their end of the meta currency economy.
I wonder if that's because the players don't have fortune and determination, which are super powerful. They think they'll be buying more action points, so the GM doesn't need as many. Yeah, could be speculation. And I mean, otherwise the rules are basically the same. The combat rules are pretty similar to other versions of UG20 with a couple of exceptions. Hit locations come back.
Yep. And the starter set comes with a die that has hit locations on it, which is handy.
The reason the hit locations come back again, it's because in the game hit locations were a thing, and it's because you can have piecemeal armor. So piecemeal armor is pointless unless you can have hit locations.
And on top of that, hit locations also, and this is explained in the starter box, if you get hit in the arm, you drop whatever you're holding. You happen to be holding in that hand. If you are hit in the head, you can suffer like I forget exactly how it's adjudicated, but basically like you could be stunned. If you're hit in the leg, you can't run. There are location specific damage consequences, which actually, I mean, it's hard. I obviously the more crunchy and fiddly bits you add to a system, the more detail and more texture and nuance that you add to it. On the other hand, it can also bog things down because it's just more fiddly stuff to deal with at the table. There's always that sweet spot that seems to be a floating midpoint between extremes. I actually like the way that they've handled hit locations. I mean, you could just roll the smart thing is you roll your damage dice with your to hit dice, because if you happen to hit, then you've already rolled the dice. It's just a habit that speeds up things a touch.
Yeah.
You could do that with the hit location die as well. And I think that it makes it easy. Obviously, if you have piecemeal armor, like what you said, you have to have hit locations. But I like the fact that there is an effect, a consequence that happens based on where you're hit. And it makes sense. And it feels like it wouldn't make table play cumbersome. So it's not like you're rolling through these, pages of tables like Rollmaster back in the 80s to determine exactly which finger got blown off or something like that.
I mean, it does make the character sheet look more complicated because you have these hit locations,
Yep.
and each hit location has different types of armor because you have physical, energy, radiation, and poison damage, and therefore the armor has different kinds of damage resistance for the different things. But again, it's a quick look on a table. I mean, again, I played this; it didn't super slow down, but it's matching the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you didn't have that in the game, you're losing part of what the Fallout computer games. I mean, the film TV program doesn't go into this much detail, but it's in there. So it's a nice little nod to this is going to be a bit more crunchy than some of the other games you might have played, like Star Trek, because we're trying to match the role playing game pretty well. And so again, that's another example of them matching the role playing game pretty well.
And on top of that, they have you have 6 stats plus luck. So you have 7 stats. Your stats they do spell out special.
Just like in the game.
Again, I think when it comes to call it the color scheme and branding, the visual and the gameplay branding that makes Fallout stand outish or is like clearly identified with Fallout, it's all represented in this tabletop game, which is cool because actually someone who's coming from the video game world who maybe isn't that much of a tabletop gamer, I actually think this could make the transition easier, but also like more fun. Like, oh, it's just like that, but I'm sitting here with other human beings. So they
the same. If you're coming from the TV show now, you'll see this little character. I think he's called Vault Boy, but I could be wrong about that.
The little big guy boy, with the hair.
And he's great because literally next to everything, so next to all of the special attributes, so this is strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and like we said, luck. Those are your stats, and there's a little different picture of how he works. And then we do have skills in here. And again, next to each skill is a little picture of him doing something. And then we have a whole massive list of, normally they would be called talents. In every other version of 2D20, these would be talents. Here they're perks because that's what they're called in the computer.
They're called in the game. And you have a little icon of Big Boy there, like, doing different things, actually doing lots of violent things.
Yeah, some of them are very violent things. But they are funny little bit. Like you said, it is really hitting the theme. This is one of the books that, like, you read the book and you're like, wow, this is they totally get Fallout doing this.
I'm gonna actually say that and this is putting aside my preference and my own likes, dislikes, whatever. I think that compared to this goes the farthest to accurately and precisely model the game, even more an existing property, even more than Star Trek Adventures. Yeah, and that's totally not a knock on Star Trek Adventures, because I think that Fallout has an easier time of it because it is crunchier, because it came from this video game and has all this, again, visual branding and ideas of stats and system sorts of things that they have, I think, brilliantly translated onto paper from a screen. this is an analog version of the video game,
Yeah.
like in all ways. It's really impressive in that respect.
I mean, it really is. I think they did a really good job of literally taking the game and going, right, well, we're going to take these bits of the game, and they mapped it onto 2D20 relatively easily, which just again shows how versatile 2D20 is. We do get one other really weird thing here, and then it's kind of mostly stand apart from some other stuff with some other subsystems. This actually has levels. Now, it doesn't have levels in the D&D style of when you level up, you get some cool new ability, because essentially every time you level up, your health goes up, you can choose to increase a skill, and you gain a perk. So it's actually a very simple leveling system. It's more akin to something like Savage Worlds, where you're leveling up, but every time you level up, you're basically getting the same thing you got last time. It's a thing to match it to the game. There are XP earning things later in the GM section, so you can give XP for various things, and that's all in the book later on. It also means, and I'm jumping ahead here, but while we're talking about levels and XP, it means we get levels for bad guys. So actually, and I don't know how well balanced they are, but of all of the 2D20 games, this is the one which has more clearly defined levels of the bad guys, because normally we kind of have minion and enforcer and the nemesis kind of thing. Well, those are probably wrong, but we have these usually have 3 levels. The trouble with that is that sometimes, you want something that's really powerful but easy to kill, or you want someone that's big. So this is much more defined.
You and I did an episode ages ago. Now that we've been doing this for as long as we have, we can say ages ago. We did an episode ages ago on the fallacy of balanced encounters, and how challenge rating in 5e and from 3rd edition forward is kind of it doesn't work fully, and doesn't have the mileage that
it's a guide.
It's a guide. It's not scientific, it's not perfectly objective and quantitative. This is and you're right that all the other 2D20 games, sometimes figuring out how to, if you want to try to balance an encounter or make an encounter it's easy to make them easy. Sometimes it's harder without making them overwhelming. To make them really challenging. This seeks to provide you a means by which to do that. And it's very closely tied. We don't need to go into detail about it, but it's very closely tied also to experience rewards based on how long did you take to solve this problem? You should get about this many. Or how many sessions did you take? What level were these monsters versus your character? This is about how much. So it gives you some guidance that's tied to these levels that is expressed in experience rewards. So that is entirely unique among the 2D20 games, and I think potentially useful. And also, for people who are coming from systems where whether it's real, whether it's true and accurate or not, that is a norm. That could be a point of attraction where you're like, oh, this system does that too. That's what I expect as normal in a game. So it does it. So I'm going to give this a fair shake.
Creating characters in this is pretty straightforward. It doesn't really go into a life path thing. You're picking an origin, which are if you know the Fallout games, he's got Brotherhood, ghouls, super mutants. For the people watching the program, you can start as a vault dweller. I think a lot of the other books that have come out have extra origins. But pretty much all these origins is they give you a trait. Now, I've checked with the index. This is the only place traits exist. So a trait here is more like they were back in Infinity Conan Day, where a trait is another word for a talent that comes from your origin. There are no rules for truth.
Although I don't even think I'd call it a talent. I would call it a descriptor that you might end up incorporating into the game or not. It's like a bold-faced adjective related to your character.
Well, some of them actually have, rules ability. So the robot has particular things from being a robot, and so they're kind of like that. They're not, they're basically because you're a dwarf, you're good at stonemasonry. They're that kind of thing. They're the racial abilities. So that's kind of what they are like, which means there are no traits or truths. But truths is, if you like truths from another 2D20 system and you wanted to add them to Fallout, it would be very easy.
Yeah.
But basically you pick you just pick your origin, which gives you some kind of bonus, and then you basically go through, pick your stats, pick your skills, choose a perk, choose your starting equipment, do your drive statistics, and you're good to go. It's very quick. So yes, I'd like it to have a life path thing, but I'm pretty sure when I did it with Scott and Brian, the point was they were both vault dwellers. So, they've been in a vault They leave the vault, can't remember why. Now you're in the Wasteland.
Yep.
The point, this is much more a game you are starting from pretty close to zero and going out into the Wasteland for the first time and then having adventures.
Let's move to that. Let's talk about, I mean, this may not take us very much time at all, but what kinds of stories, we talked about system, what kinds of stories would you tell in this setting? I think this seems pretty darn obvious.
I sandboxed the hell out of this. Yeah, my idea was I created a map. I took a real life map of San Francisco and the outskirts. I went slightly to the, I think, well, I can't do east and west very easily, but I went slightly to the east, found some wilderness, said that's where the vault comes out. I put some other things on the map, and then they went and just did things. And then I kind of run it like how the game, they come across some people, and these people are like, these super mutants down this tunnel are stopping us trading with other people. Can you help us out? And they're like, yeah, we'll do that because we're nice. And they kind of fumbled their way through with a vague idea of they were trying to head west because they thought the ocean was that way. And I remember them eventually with a lot, because that's how most Fallout things go. That you've got a big mission. On your way to do your big mission, there's lots of little missions.
Yep.
One of the episodes, early to mid episodes of the TV show literally makes a joke out of this. That basically, I can't remember the wording of it, but literally joking that kind of, while you're on your way to doing something important, lots of these other little things get in your way. That's what happens in the game. You've got like a big, something big's happened. You've left the vault and you're doing thing. But before you can do thing, you've got to do this thing for someone else. And on the way to doing this thing for someone else, you get sidetracked in this other. And by the time you've done all these side quests, you forget what the main quest is.
Actually, you know what's handy in that? Okay, now this is, by the way, is tied to levels and it is tied to the experience system. So this is explicitly addressed in the GM section. What's handy about that is this provides, I think, a lot of guidance for GMs. Like how do you make it feel like that? Well, it makes sense that, okay, I have this big thing and I have to head across this treacherous terrain and area, and I'm going to an unknown place. Well, things are going to happen on the way. And it's not just some like stupid random encounter like, oh, I'm on my way to this village and a basilisk comes out of the forest, and you just have to deal with something that's a total non sequitur. This makes more sense in that respect. So I like the fact that they provide that guidance, and again, it fits in the game. Again, we see it in the show. All these things tie together well. Yeah. So story wise, that works.
Before I get on to talking about why would you even do sandboxing? Because that doesn't sound very interesting. Because part of the thing Fallout, they provide some key rules in here, which does make sandbox exploring a wilderness, kind of like you're doing Kingmaker.
Yeah.
There's the rules. There's a reason why this would be possible. I just want to point this out. The first 80 pages of the book have the core rules, the combat rules, and character creation. The next 100 pages of the book are equipment.
Yeah.
So there's more equipment, and you think, why is there so much equipment? Well, part of the reason there's so much equipment is because a lot of this equipment is found. A lot of it would be scavenging, bartering, stealing, and also modding your equipment. So everything that your character can have. So pretty much every gun, every weapon, every part of armor can be modded with a whole bunch of different mods, which again now that's going beyond some of the computer games. That's going into kind of more of the really modern ones where that was part of the thing.
Yeah.
Because in Fallout 3, I don't remember modding stuff. I would make stuff and I'd find it, but modding is a much more. So again, they know the property. They've gone into something about property.
And they've brought in these different elements from different versions of it. Yeah. The gear, although for a post-apocalyptic world where scavenging, scrounging, and moving through a wasteland, you have to have lots of stuff.
Yes.
That actually, the survival side of things, I think, requires that stuff be important. Like you can't just go get things at a store. You're going to have to find them, and providing this massive diversity of things and then adding in this, modification rules and whatnot. I think that makes sense. It is funny to think that, almost a third of the book is just
crazy
gear. But I think it makes sense for the property and the kinds of stories that you would seek to tell in the setting.
And it's kind of, again, it's the kind of stuff you only need to look at it when you need it.
Yeah.
If someone finds it, or they wanted to make particular things, they remember it from the game, or they want to do it from the show, it's in the book. but it's not like you need to look at it all the time. It's a lot of tables full of stuff which is useful. You don't need to check. Yeah. So now, in terms of why it works in Sandbox, there's a chapter literally called Survival, which is the last real rule chapter, and then the rest there's a load of description of the different factions in the game.
Yeah.
So we get the rules. We get rules for fatigue, for hunger, for thirst. I have to say these rules are a bit weird. I remember playing it like and kind of thinking some of this doesn't really make sense, and they have kind of these weird times. So I'll give you an example. You got this thing about you're hungry. You're full if you've eaten, but then after an hour you become sated, and after 4 hours being sated, you're now peckish, and after 8 hours being peckish, you're hungry.
Question:
you're hungry.
Is the term peckish used in the game?
I don't think so.
I mean, the game as in the video games.
It could be, but so when you're in the game, there are a lot of conditioned things that you get that it'll pop up, but mostly you just kind of ignore them. And at some point, your character's just like dragging a bit, and you're like, oh crap. And then you go and look, and you realize, oh no, I haven't drunk anything, I haven't eaten anything, and I've got radiation. Well, so then you just like you eat, you drink, you take your rad away, and you're fine. Is not
exactly a commonly used term. I don't know if it's in the video. I haven't played the computer game.
I think you generally you have hunger and you have thirst, and I think it was probably just a bar or a number.
Okay.
So obviously they couldn't do a bar. They didn't want to do a number because then you'd have to track a number.
Yeah.
But instead, so here what made you think you're tracking is time. You're having to track how long is it since you ate, drank, and so on. And then there are penalties if you keep not doing it, then you're starving, you are dehydrated, and you get problems, which mostly gives you fatigue. That is a little bit of bookkeeping, but it's the kind of thing, I think when we did this, we kind of hand waved it and went, let's just worry about the end of a day. If at the end of a day, you haven't eaten anything or you haven't drunk anything, there's a penalty.
I don't think
we worried about the steps.
I think a way that you could handle that is, do your characters have the necessary supplies?
Yeah.
And are they, at least by clear implication, making it clear that there's time plugged into their day to consume those things? Because I mean, oh my gosh, that would be a launch yourself over the table and strangle your GM moment. It's like, I'm sorry, you're losing points because you didn't tell me you were sipping from your canteen. Yeah. Like, give me a break. But yeah, it's way more survival crunchy in that respect than any of the other games.
Yeah. So we can't wait. Sleep exposure disease, and then we get to the thing that should be really fun and cool, which is scavenging.
Yeah.
Now, the scavenging rules gives this thing about where to scavenge. It gives us a whole bunch of stuff about scavenging. Scavenging, you have a category of the location. You have a level of the location. You have the scale, which is how big is the place you're scavenging.
Makes sense.
The degree to which it's already been scavenged.
Makes sense.
And what items you can get in there. And then it breaks down these items, this table, and it gives us a table for degrees. And then it goes
table with degree and what is it, scope? That's actually two tables smushed into one. It's actually a tad confusing. Let me say this. Then you go a couple of pages forward in the book and you find a bunch of these tables for random stuff, clothing, ammunition, this, that, and the third. And there's no explanation of how the damn rules work. Okay, I'm gonna say this, and if the Modiphius people decide that I'm persona non grata, that's life. People have been saying this for years. There are times when Modiphius is so ferociously bad about explaining their rules and making them clear and providing notional examples to drive home how a rule or subsystem works. And this, honestly, is darn near the top of that list. It's awful. And you go to the GM section and it isn't any better. In fact, it even says in one of the places, this is described in more detail later. Yeah. That later has seemingly yet to come.
Well, see, it gets worse because if you go to the GM toolkit, which I have,
which is a separate purchase,
which is advertised as having this, it's full of tables, it's full of random tables. So once you've decided what is in the location, you can roll. And there's random encounters that you can have in there.
All kinds of good stuff.
It still doesn't give us any examples. Again, It has this thing, creating scavenging locations. It gives us a thing again for scale and category and other and degree, but it doesn't actually give us, I mean, it wouldn't have killed them to just give us 2 pages of example scavenging scenes that you could use.
Exactly.
I've got like 30 pages of flipping random tables.
Yeah, like, honestly,
but I don't have something I can use.
And I say this directly to the folks who wrote this stuff. Like, who read over this and didn't say, wait a minute, this is not explained. Like, how is someone coming in from the outside going to make sense of this? You have all these tables, but it is not clearly, I don't even think by implication, it is not explained how you determine, well, is this location, is it more of a, how many rolls on the clothing table? Or am I including ammunition here or not? I mean, I could imagine where you could have a site that in and of itself would not seem to imply the presence of ammunition. However, since it is larger and since it has been gone over a few times, there could be ammunition left there from other people who had scavenged it in the past. There's nothing to explain this. And
That's,
so
some of that stuff is in the GM toolkit. But even in the GM toolkit, it lacks it. Literally, this is way you can think about going it. So it goes over in the GM toolkit. It's 2 pages. They easily could have put it in this book.
Look, I got to tell you, you do not present a call it like an A-list subsystem, something that is, I believe, scavenging is instrumental to Fallout as a setting for the stories you want to tell there. You don't not explain a system like that in your core book. You do not ask people to buy something else, which then itself is incomplete. Like, seriously, I don't understand. People bitch about this stuff on their Discord, people have in their forums before, people do on other social medias. It's like, it is something that Modiphius needs someone who is like the non-rules person, the non-2D20 rules person, to proofread every single thing they write. So almost like a non-gamer, and be like, I don't understand this. You need to explain this better. Because there are places where they just fall flat on their faces. And what's crazy is that the rest of this game, I think, is well presented and explained.
Now, as a GM using this, when I looked for, and I'd read this section and went, huh, and I went to the GM section and I read through the GM section.
And you went,
and I, okay, the rules. Okay, I've got a page about safety and consent. Okay, well,
you have 2 pages about
friends,
that.
I ignore that. Then there's the thing, quest, campaign. Okay, there's some good, there's a lot more stuff in here than a lot of other GM sections in 2D20 games. Yep. How to give experience points. Oh, there literally is nothing.
Nope.
So I just had to work it out, because at that point there was nothing.
It's like the person they tasked to write those pages didn't do the work, and no one remembered that the work was supposed to get done.
So I just had to work it out. So I remember, I've found it now, because I did this, because it was all online. I created a Google Slides thing, so a PowerPoint with loads of tables in for all the rules that I could quickly refer to instead of flicking back and forth in the PDF. Yep. And I printed some of them, and I had all my maps and stuff to show the guys, and pictures, I had all my art as well. And there's a table in here which has all of the different categories, and it has some locations, and it literally has sort of a min and max.
Yeah.
If they search and what kind of stuff they could find. Yep. But I made that up myself. It wasn't explained anywhere in the rules.
That is how to use all of that.
Well, that's just like a table I can use. So when they go, we search in something and you get so many successes, I had decided that in this place there was going to be there's going to be some armor, and this other place there wasn't going to be any armor or weapons.
This seems like you buy a model kit. You buy a plastic model kit, and you see like there's a stack of 4 or 5 of those spines just covered in model pieces, and there is neither an inventory list nor are there instructions on how to put the thing together. You're like, I think everything is here. I've just got to figure this out. Now, an experienced GM, fine. Someone coming in new to run the thing,
it would have been so easy to have one more page of explanation of how for a GM to create it instead of dumping it into the Games Master Toolkit,
which is then not even explained well.
Yeah, and then 2 pages of sample scavenging locations. Considering how many pages of tables are in here.
Yep.
Because then the thing that's annoying is that in a lot of the tables in the book, for example, in the equipment section, are just tables of stuff. But then when you're doing scavenging, it's random. So what most of, and I'll just flick you to page. Here we go. So here's an example. So it's what I do think where it blanks it out. Okay, here's an example of these tables. These tables are basically the same as the tables in the book, but they have 2D20 roll things on the front of them to make them random. So I mean, all we did is that every time, once we decided what was in a location, I just rolled the dice and used the equipment table in the book, so it wasn't a hassle. One of the things that does annoy me is all those tables, they are 2d20 locations, which means, because I'm not sure they worked this out, the things that are on the 2 and the 40 are way less likely to turn up. And the stuff in, so you end up just getting the same stuff again and again.
Is there any, because you're creating a bell curve in that roll, was there any kind of, were they deliberate about how they sequence those things?
Looking at it, I'm not convinced. Because so there's one here for beverages, and if I look at it now, dirty water is the most common thing because it's around the 21 mark, which is your average.
Yeah.
And then either side of that is beer and purified water, and then the far extremes are wine and vodka. So that makes me think, yes, they have put some thought into this. And so, and there's an ammunition one where mini nukes are the far end of one thing. So yes, I do think they have actually put thought into this. But obviously, when I didn't have that book, I just had the equipment list, so I didn't have anything. So they have at least put some thought into how they were going to do that. But it does kind of end up, the scavenging rules should have been better developed because it's a key thing. There's 100 pages of equipment and there's loads of pages on crafting.
You know what it's like?
And there's not as much for scavenging.
It's a little like, it's a little like, but far worse than Starship Combat in Star Trek Adventures. It is. I mean,
yeah, because at least the rules are there. They're badly explained, but they are there. This is basically missing stuff. I mean, I for years have had people on thing going, please recommend me a system to play Fallout, and I've gone play Fallout 2D20. It's amazing because I have a mental recollection of playing it and it being lots and lots of fun. What I've forgotten is that I had to do some of the legwork on getting the scavenging rules to work. I'd forgotten that.
Again, an essential subsystem for the setting to tell the stories, and I'm going to be really bad and punny here. They fell flat on Fallout. That was terrible.
That was shocking.
Yeah. Now, otherwise, let me pull out of my my negativity death spiral here. Otherwise, I think the game is well presented. It checks all the boxes for the look, for the vibe, for the this, for, all that of the setting. Personally, there's something I find off-putting about the look, the tone, like dark humor. I could totally, I'm fine with dark humor. I'm fine with a little bit of camp now and again. That's fine too. But there's something, I don't know, this flavor of camp and that type of the level of violence in Fallout, like I find the combination of it kind of off-putting. So I personally, I have gone round and round as to whether or not I want to play this game, and I probably actually don't if I were to play it as it is supposed to be, like setting-wise presented. But that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've played the computer games, if you've watched the TV show, the role-playing game, other than Scavenging, and even the scavenging rules, once you work out how they're meant to work.
Once you figure out how they're going to work.
I figured out. I mean, I was a bit nut when I've looked at some adventures and realized even those adventures, they're not providing me with decent scavenging locations.
Which is nuts.
Thinking, like, seriously?
Like you have in the starter box and you have in the book, they have opportunities through these adventures to provide examples so that even if they didn't explain it, you'd look at it and say, oh, that's how they pieced it together.
Well, that's what I was looking at again, because when I played it, all I had was I didn't even have the book. I had the PDF of the core book. So now there's other stuff out. I'm looking through this stuff, expecting to see just like you have for a bad guy, like a monster, a little table of scavenging location and all of the categories, and they don't exist. They just aren't doing it. It's like scavenging is a really big deal, and they've pretended it's not a big deal. And
then they say in places that this is explained later.
Yeah. Where? And so it's like they've decided that's not an important part, and we're just going to get on with telling the story. So, but I played it, and when we played it, we had a lot of fun. Yeah. And having watched the TV show, and Brian's watched the TV show, and Scott probably 6 months from now watch the TV show because he's always behind. What want to do? I mean, I'm already thinking like this is the thing I want to play next, and I think the only real question is, shall we play a pre-written adventure? Because they exist now. There are pre-written adventures for Fallout now. I mean, I was amazed because I have to put how and say I was wrong. I have for many years said the only thing they support is Star Trek. I've said they support Star Trek. They put a few things out for Acton Cthulhu, and everything else they have completely forgotten. That is not true. Okay, in terms of Fallout, there is a Games Master's book. There's a settlement guide. There is a Wastelanders or Wanderers guide or something.
There's some other books.
And there's quite a few adventures out for it. So I am straight up wrong having said that they are not.
Well, no, you were right a few years ago. You're not right anymore because the situation has changed. I'm interested
but they have
to see,
been supporting it. So.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how or if it takes off, if there's traction among gamers because of the show. Now we have 3 properties
pushing it.
So we'll see. We'll see. But
I mean, it's all like you go to drive-through. It's the thing being advertised on drive-through.
Yeah,
they are advertising it.
I'll end with this. I think if you're interested in Fallout, if Fallout as it is presented either in the video game or in the Amazon series, if that look, if that feel, if that kind of vibe of story is of interest to you, I think this game would be great. There is one thing you're going to have to figure out on your own, but otherwise, I think it's a really solid game.
Makes me think that is something I can write on my. That's what I need to write. I need to write an article on the blog for Scavenging in Fallout, which actually takes some of the stuff from the book and some of the stuff in the other book and says this is how you actually come up with locations. And here's some sample locations for you.
You're hired.
And put that out there. So next time that people say Fallout's rubbish, I can go, Fallout is not rubbish. They just missed a bit out of the book. Go and have a look here. That will help you.
How long do you think before you can have that done?
I would say I was going to do it tomorrow, but tomorrow I can't. But yeah, by the end of the week I could have this done.
So I'm going to hold you to that. And so
at least I can have the first part of the article.
We're going to put a link in the notes here. Now, there's a link to our Discord. You should join. There's a link to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on the pod, you should subscribe. You should subscribe to the pod. You should get involved in the conversation wherever you're listening, whatever. But we'll also put a link to Chris's rules for this so that you can make sense of it and not sit there and be like, am I missing something? And spend 15, 20 minutes of your day wondering, what the hell is there a page? Am I stupid? Am I not fine? No, it's not there. But Chris will supply that for you.
I'll put an article in explaining what you need. I think I'm going to do another article explaining how to do it. And then I'll do an article with just examples with just some.
There you go.
Sample ones you can put in. And if I get that done by a week on Wednesday, you can drop the episode on Wednesday.
That is lovely. And actually we have, we can do that. All right. Excellent.
So usual stuff, like, subscribe, join the Discord, leave comments, tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
We make a great stocking stuffer. Remember that.
The new miniature stuff that I'm releasing, which is now on there.
Yep.
There you go.
There we go.
Join our cult. Oh.
No. Join our movement. Be a part of the movement. How's that?
I think I would genuinely rather say cult.
Okay.
Because if like a cult, at least I'm being honest.
Can we say cabal?
Yeah, because that sounds cool and shady. Yeah.
Cabal. Okay. Join our cabal.
A movement is a cult pretending it's not a cult. That's what a movement is.
How's this? In the social media age, we could ask people to change their social media, their image or their avatar with a Fluff and Crunch filter to raise awareness about Fluff and Crunch. Like when some horrible thing happens in the world and people are like, I'm raising awareness. Like, you're not doing anything. You clicked on something and you didn't even give money. You didn't do jack.
It's funny when you see people, usually people are built, or people don't use Facebook a lot, who have still got, things that are sort of 2 years old.
Right. You were all about the thing that week. Okay, great. All right, that's what we should do. We're going to offer Fluff and Crunch social media filters so that when the thing comes around, you can raise awareness and stand with the thing and Fluff and Crunch's cabal. Right on. All right, we've done our piece. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.